Cordillera Blanca in the Peruvian Andes is home to 330,000 people and unique flora and fauna. The fertile land is on steep terrain and is mainly managed by families without machines, but by hand. It is a wild, untouched landscape thriving with life, but there is less and less water, and the lives of people, animals, and plants are threatened. The 2020 report by the National Institute for Water shows that global warming has caused the water-storing glaciers to lose 40% of their surface area in the last 70 years. The people here have long struggled for better living conditions. Now there are schools and housing projects. The state gives each family free land. They work their plots sustainably without pesticides, and different seeds are planted in rotation to protect the soil. However, many sources of water previously sustaining the area all year are now dry by August, but the community is hopeful they will overcome these difficulties. How do you combat a problem that is triggered on other continents? The future is uncertain. But they are a community who have proven themselves able to adapt. Fish farming was recently introduced here to provide additional sources of nutrition. We begin our expedition in the small town of Collón and embark on a journey through the Cordillera Blanca mountain range. Our aim is to understand the effects of global warming here. How does it affect people in the valley, farmers in the mountains, and wildlife along the glacial streams? And what can designers do in the face of these changes? We enter the canyon of Ixinca in the Huascarán National Park, declared a World Heritage Site in 1985, a species-rich ecosystem. Life has adapted here over millions of years to the altitude and harsh climate, all thanks to the abundance of water. But rapidly melting glaciers have changed this landscape. The rocky peaks of the Urus Mountain were completely covered in ice and snow 50 years ago. The National Institute for Water states that 136 glaciers have disappeared over the past 42 years. 251 square kilometers are now ice-free. On average, the glaciers retreat 19 meters a year. Even higher altitude glaciers are affected. Today, you will see more rocks and debris here than ice and snow. In order to regulate the status of the glacial lakes, a canal and a dam were built here. At the time when the glacier was still growing and the sediment was pushing the glacier tongue forward, a basin had formed. It will be even more important in the future to control this huge amount of water. The Tokyarahu, over 6 kilometers high. Since the 1980s, the snow line has retreated by 500 meters. 4/5 of mountain glaciers observed by researchers worldwide are currently losing ice mass. The summit of the Ranrapalca mountain is 6,162 meters above sea level. What used to be a snowy landscape now no longer exists. The danger is evident. The former natural dam has been shattered by an earthquake. Fortunately, water levels in the glacial lake were not high when this occurred. If they had been, masses of overflowing water would have caused a mudslide, devastating the valley and potentially claiming thousands of lives. We leave the camp and ascend to the mountains of the Urus group. The night is spent on the banks of a newly formed lake. The question is, how long will glaciers be here? And what consequences does the melting process have for the entire region? The 2018 IPCC report shows that it may soon be too late to reduce global warming. If greenhouse gas emissions are not reduced, we are in danger of passing the point of return. The result? A catastrophic overturning of the global climate system. According to measurements by the Mauna Loa Reference Station in Hawaii, the annual average in 2017 was already around 405 ppm. This is the highest CO2 concentration in at least 800,000 years, around 41% above the pre-industrial level. It's hard to imagine what this landscape may soon look like and what may be lost with it. We cross the treacherous pass and descend into the Aquilpo Canyon. At an altitude of 4,950 meters, there should be snow. In the 1980s, this glacial lake was the size of a puddle. Now, traveling around it on foot would take an hour. Several years ago, the glacier tongue was still in contact with the water. A glacier will melt more quickly when in contact with heat-storing water. But the danger is not simply the loss of the glacier as a water reservoir. Lead and cadmium stored under the ice masses are released, tainting the quality of water. On the Tokyarahu Glacier, symptoms of melting are already apparent. Cavities on the edge of the glacier catch warm winds and transport them deeper inside, further accelerating the melting process. As beautiful as the glacier formations are, we can see their fragility. 200 years ago, at the beginning of industrialization, no one would have expected the exploitation of the planet to have such dramatic effects. But there still seems to be plenty of water here. The air on the surface of the Earth has already warmed up significantly. In 2016, the average global surface temperature was around 0.94 centigrade higher than the average in the 20th century. This was announced by the American Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration in early 2017. Will humankind be able to adapt and continue to live in the valleys? The flora and fauna will not recover so quickly. You can be certain that this region will be populated by new species in the future. It is now important for people to store the water, which is so rapidly melting. But where is this possible, when many glacial lakes are already on the verge of overflow and must be drained to stop the dams from breaking? We leave this world of ice and snow. Descending further into the canyon, we enter the vegetation of the wetlands. The terrain here is flat and a place where the mountain waters gather before flowing further into the valley. Although this area is small, a unique vegetation zone has developed. It is possible to find plants that only thrive on these few hectares. 2016 was the warmest year since the start of climate evaluations, exceeding the previous record years in 2015 and 2014. 3 record years in a row are unprecedented in the history of weather recording. Sadly, an upward trend can be clearly observed. The river splits into many small channels and floods the plain with water, until they unite again where the canyon tapers. The swelling masses of water become raging rivers that can cut through rock. The geological properties and rapidly changing height differences create many small and unique habitats. On these meadows we will relax for a night and continue the following day through the largest polylepis forest in the Cordillera Blanca. The polylepis belongs to the rose family, with a reddish peeling bark and a sinuous stem. Several varieties of this plant are nearly extinct. In spite of this, the forests maintain a unique flora and fauna, and a high degree of biodiversity. They are considered to be one of the most endangered ecosystems in the high Andes. especially since they're the only source of construction and firewood in large areas. This forest is one of the few in the Andes that still appears untouched. Many animals such as the cougar, the collar bear, or wild chamois still find refuge here from humans. Biologists around the world have observed that the habitats of many plants have now shifted upwards. Migratory birds return earlier, fish adopt an earlier spawning season, and interrelationships between organisms are disturbed. The flowering times of certain plants no longer match the flight cycle of the insects that pollinate them. 8 days later, we see the first efforts of civilization to tame the passage of nature. With the end of the first expedition, the accumulated knowledge and open questions that were formed, I decided to continue my investigation and learn more about the water balance in this region. The impressions left on me by this journey are substantial, as the mountains have much wisdom to offer. Lake Conococha, 4,020 meters above sea level. It is here that the Rio Santa River begins. The lake is fed by tributaries from the Cordillera Blanca in the east and Cordillera Negra in the west. The main tributary, the Tuco River, flows from a glacial lake 5 kilometers above sea level, but is now only a trickle despite the rainy season. The most recent measurements show that the lake stretches across 1.3 million cubic meters of water. Despite the altitude, it is rich with fish, which attracts a great diversity of birds. But the diversity of fauna is deceptive, as increasing contamination by humans have made many species rare. In the past, large flocks of flamingos searched the cloudy water for food. In 1984, it was discovered that the bottom of the lake was rich in treasure. Unbelievable amounts of gold dust were found. The first armed conflicts and deaths have already taken place here in the fight for water. In the end, the municipality won and prevailed against the drainage of the lake. Access to water, fair distribution and use has been a political problem in the past, which will become more acute with increasing scarcity. We journeyed to the Pastorudi mountain that neighbors the Toco Glacier. The river running from this glacier has almost dried up. These structures indicate that this mountain was once completely covered with glaciers, but some special forms of life grow here. The Puya Raimondi has a flower of 8 meters in height, which takes up to 70 years to bloom. The Pastorudi Glacier tongue ran here 30 years ago. All the black volcanic rock that could be seen here was covered by a thick blanket of ice and snow. The only remnant of this are deep furrows, which the masses of ice carved into the volcanic rock on their path into the valley. The exposed volcanic rock absorbs the sun's rays and results in temperatures catastrophic for the ice. The 2020 report published by the National Institute for Water states that the glacier has lost 22% of its size over the course of the last 35 years, withdrawing 16 meters annually since 1980. What little remains is predicted to be gone by 2028. According to the report, the glacial lake that had only begun to form in 2001 now stores 750,000 cubic meters of water, and will continue to swell until it is only fed by the rain. It is important for future generations to archive what will soon be lost, so they can better understand their influence on the world and be inspired by the beauty of nature. To do my part in achieving this, I captured numerous structures of the glacier through the use of 3D scanning technology. The black deposits visible on the ice are dust and soot particles carried by the wind. They are the result of waste products from internal combustion engines and microplastics. Carried by the melting ice, they make their way back into the valley, contaminating the water of innumerable streams with heavy metals. I am now aware that my contribution as a product designer for a better future is to create designs that will inspire future generations, helping them understand their relationship to nature. We will no longer be able to save the glaciers. The damage done is irreversible. But it is important for me to share my experience with whomever I can, through the mediums of film, photography, product design, and exhibitions. I have a tool I can use to achieve this. These were informative days for my project. It is clearly apparent how quickly and through what processes glaciers melt, and the ramifications of this on the plateau ecosystems and their inhabitants. Stretching over 180 kilometers, the Cordillera Blanca has the highest mountains on the South American continent. Almost 1.2 million people live here in the untouched region. Agriculture blooms in the rainy season from October to March. Between April and September, the population rely entirely on meltwater from the glaciers. Most people live along the Rio Santo River, nearly 350 kilometers long, that brings life to the fertile valley of Callejón de Hualas. From there, it flows into the Pacific Ocean. In the dry season, the river makes little contribution to irrigation, drinking water, and hydroelectricity. To ensure water flow during this period, dams were built along several lakes on the western flanks of the glaciated mountains. For the people in this region, this is one of the few ways for life to continue. Although adventure tourism during the dry season brings income to the area, the influx of mountaineers, skiers, and ice climbers will reduce as the glaciers continue to retreat. Only in recent years has the awareness begun to spread among the people of the Cordillera Blanca that their lives depend on the glaciers, and that every individual has an impact on the climate. However, awareness is not enough. People must drastically change their lifestyles for the sake of the future. But in this region, there are those who have solutions at hand. The Cordillera Negra, on the far side of the valley, has not been covered with snow since the first settlers. Here, people have developed strategies to make do with what little water they have. Every drop of rainwater is caught in both natural and artificial pools, so that enough is available in the dry season. Fields here are carefully drip irrigated, unlike in the Cordillera Blanca, where they are simply flooded via canals connected to the glacial streams. Campo Santo. In 1970, a severe earthquake devastated the town. 25,000 people lost their lives overnight. Here in Yungay, the whole town was buried in a mudslide. The earthquake released a huge chunk of ice from the Huascaran, Peru's highest mountain. It then fell into the Yanganuco glacial lake. The overflow resulted in a terrible avalanche of mud, snow, and rock. 50 years later, where a bustling city centre once stood, now stands a vast public park to commemorate the deceased. In a place like this, it is important to consider the consequences of melting glaciers and the destruction that can occur when glacial lakes overflow. To help avert these disasters in future, an early warning system is being implemented. We can only hope that such measures are enough. It was very important, on a personal level, to take this trip. How can you attempt to tackle such a huge problem if you don't experience every aspect and consequence of it with your own eyes? The encounters I had with the people who are living here are precious. It was of vital importance to get as close as possible to the glaciers, to understand firsthand their relationship to the planet and its inhabitants. The result is an archive of 2,000 photos, 3 hours of film, 2 hours of aerial photography, 1 hour of audio recording, and over 100 3D scans. The long-term goal is to create an exhibition to give people an insight into this hidden world of mountains, valleys, canyons, snow and ice, and how integral it is to the lives of people, animals, plants, both in its vicinity and far beyond. Only by imparting the knowledge of what has been lost and the beauty of what is still there but will soon no longer be, is it possible for people worldwide to demonstrate the strength of their collective action and initiate change.